last 16 years, on the third weekend of September, the city of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, have held a 2-day festival. There's live music, bus tours, cosplay events, guest speakers, hay rides, and much more. It's a popular family attraction and is sponsored by many local businesses and organisations, including the mayor himself. But what exactly are the citizens of Point Pleasant commemorating? To answer this question, we need to go back to November 1966, where one man witnessed something he could not explain, which would later begin terrorising residents of Point Pleasant for over a year. Today, we look at the creature known simply as the Mothman. On the 12th of November 1966, Kenneth Duncan, with the aid of 4 other men, were digging a grave for Kenneth's father-in-law, Homer Smith, who was to be laid to rest in Reamer Hill Cemetery in the town of Clendenin, West Virginia. It was here that Kenneth claimed to see a large brown figure gliding through the trees, which he stated was far too large to be a bird, instead resembling a humanoid figure with wings. The creature, which appeared for around a minute, was only witnessed by Kenneth, and whilst the men spoke of the encounter with close friends and family, it was only after news of a second sighting some 80 miles away in Point Pleasant that Kenneth decided to report what he saw. The West Virginia Ordnance Works, later dubbed the TNT area by locals, was a munitions factory employing 3,500 people in Point Pleasant during the peak of the Second World War. On the 15th of November 1966, 3 days after the sighting at the Reamer Hill Cemetery, 2 young married couples, consisting of Linda and Roger Scarberry and Steve and Mary Mallet, were riding in a black 1957 Chevy driven by Roger towards the TNT area, which had become a popular hangout for teenagers and young adults. As they arrived, Steve pointed out some kind of animal with large glowing red eyes reflecting in the headlights of the car. Described by the teens as a grey human-like figure with wings, which stood approximately 6 to 7 feet tall, the animal walked in an unsteady fashion away from the car's blinding lights before heading around the side of the Old North power plant. Frightened by what they saw, Roger quickly pulled away and began driving home on Route 62. But the group soon witnessed the creature take off into the air and begin pursuing the vehicle. Roger, who was now travelling speeds of up to 100 miles an hour, was unable to outrun the creature, which allegedly scraped the top of his car with its wings while squeaking like a giant mouse, as Mary described. The pursuit finally ended as Roger arrived at Point Pleasant, where the creature took off over a field and disappeared from sight. After debating whether or not to contact the police, Roger and Steve decided they should go back and see if what they had witnessed was real, and if it was still out there. Upon making their way back to the location, the teens noticed a dead dog in the road, and it was here that they again witnessed the creature, which jumped out near where they had seen the body of the dog, flew over the top of their car and into a nearby field, again disappearing from sight. Now convinced it was real, the group contacted Mason County's Deputy Sheriff, Millard Halstead, who at first thought it was a hoax, but upon witnessing how terrified the 2 young couples were, and aware of their trusted reputation within the community, Halstead took the report seriously and headed back to the TNT area with the teens to investigate. Upon arriving, however, the creature was nowhere to be seen, and despite reportedly hearing strange static on his radio whilst driving to the TNT area, Halstead could neither confirm nor deny what the teens had witnessed. And as for the body of the dead dog on the side of the road, that had also disappeared. On the 16th of November 1966, following on from the incident at the TNT area, local newspapers began reporting, eventually naming the creature the Mothman. Subsequently, many more people would also come forward claiming to have seen the Mothman around the same time as the Scarberry and Mallet sighting, Kenneth Duncan being one of them. And in the preceding 13 months, there would be no less than 30 documented sightings of the Mothman in both Point Pleasant and the surrounding towns. The Scarberrys reported regular sightings and interactions with the Mothman at their home on 13th Street, Point Pleasant. Tom Urey, a shoe salesman driving into Point Pleasant on Route 62, would report a bird-like creature circling above his convertible. Lawrence Gray reported seeing a winged figure at the foot of his bed and believed the Mothman people had been seeing was in fact the devil himself. Virginia Thomas would see a large grey man-like figure appear and then, moving at great speeds, would disappear into the trees. And 4 hunters claimed to have also encountered a red-eyed grey figure. Then all of a sudden, 13 months after those first incidents, the sighting stopped.
I was standing right here in my kitchen preparing dinner, and my 2 boys came out the back door down the steps to get their bicycles. They got down to the bottom of the steps here and they started screaming. We heard this terrible boom, and my boys looked around and saw the bridge starting to fall. Well, as soon as I heard the sound...
The Silver Bridge collapse was the 3rd biggest national disaster and loss of life that Americans would witness in 1967. And as a result, it was also considered at the time to be the worst bridge accident in the United States. Built in 1928, the Silver Bridge was an I-bar chain suspension bridge that would take travellers from Main Street in Point Pleasant to Gallipolis in Ohio. Having been poorly maintained and built in a time when the average motor vehicle ownership in America was approximately 204 vehicles per 1,000 people, the bridge was not designed for the weight load it would later experience in the late 1960s, when the average car ownership had more than doubled in the United States. The cause of the collapse came down to the failure of a single I-bar in a chain, having had a defect of just 2.5mm or 0.1 inches. With the rush hour traffic weighing down on the bridge, it finally gave way, crashing down into the Ohio River and taking with it just over 30 vehicles and their passengers. After 16 days of clearing through the wreckage, the death toll stood at 46 dead with 2 missing, and 9 people were also injured but fortunately later recovered. As a result of the collapse, similar bridges were inspected, with many facing demolition or were scheduled for major repair and maintenance. And in 1969, the Silver Memorial Bridge was opened approximately 1 mile upstream from the original location of the Silver Bridge. Prior to the bridge collapsing, several residents of Point Pleasant reported to writer John Keel, author of the Mothman Prophecies, that they had experienced nightmares involving the bridge and river, one of which was a newspaper reporter by the name of Mary Heyer, who would regularly write to John Keel, informing him of all the goings-on in Point Pleasant involving the Mothman. In one of her nightmares, Mary stated to John Keel, "I had a terrible nightmare. There were a lot of people drowning in the river, and Christmas packages were floating everywhere in the water. It's like something awful is going to happen." Virginia Thomas had also reported having nightmares of people dying in the Ohio River, and several other residents claimed to have seen the Mothman on the bridge the day it had collapsed. As sightings of the Mothman seem to completely cease after the Silver Bridge collapse, many believe that the creature was possibly an omen of death. Featured in folklore around the world, omens of death come in many forms, common ones being black cats or witnessing your own doppelganger. These omens are believed to serve the purpose of warning those who witness them of an impending death in the family or even of their own death, and can even warn us of catastrophic loss of life. And with 4 other major disasters having links to Mothman-like sightings in the days preceding the events, it appears possible that the Mothman, or even Mothmen, could very well be supernatural creatures, either warning us of, or perhaps are even attracted to, major disasters and the death they bring with them. But for others, the apparent disappearance of the Mothman could also be attributed to a wounded city, who, when faced with the tragedy and loss of life that the bridge collapse brought with it, were more focused on coming to terms with the real-life disaster and were no longer interested in the weird and unexplained creature who some considered responsible for taking away their loved ones. Many other theories as to the identity of the Mothman have also been put forward over the years. Suggestions such as barn owls or other large birds, angels, the Native American thunderbird, prototype flying machines, mass hysteria, and aliens have all been considered to have been mistaken for the Mothman, and some believe it was nothing more than a simple hoax. The fact is, we will never truly know what the residents of Point Pleasant witnessed, or at least what they believe they witnessed. And with sightings around the world of flying humanoid creatures having been reported as recent as 2017, it would appear that whatever the Mothman is and what its purpose or intentions are, it's not going to leave us anytime soon.